The emergency beacon pierced through the void of space like a dying scream, its signal weak and fading as guided his salvage vessel through the asteroid field of 442b. He'd been working these outer rim territories for 15 years, collecting space debris and abandoned cargo pods that drifted between the civilized worlds. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and kept him far from the political mess that the galactic empire had become. Rubbed his tired eyes and checked the scanner again. The beacon was coming from somewhere deep within the asteroid field, probably another merchant vessel that had taken a wrong turn and ended up as space scrap. He'd seen it 100 times before. Pirates, engine failures, navigation errors, the void was full of broken dreams and empty ships. "Computer, calculate the safest route to that beacon," said, settling into his pilot's chair. His ship, the Wanderer, wasn't much to look at, a patchwork of salvaged parts and jury-rigged systems, but she'd never let him down. The automated navigation system hummed to life. "Warning, beacon originates from restricted Imperial space, approach not recommended." Frowned, Imperial space meant trouble, and trouble meant Imperial Navy patrols. But something about that beacon bothered him. It wasn't the standard distress frequency used by merchant vessels or civilian craft. This signal carried the complex harmonic patterns of Imperial military technology, but it was broadcasting on an open emergency channel. Override safety protocols, plot the course. 20 minutes later, found himself staring at something that made his blood run cold. Floating among the asteroids was an Imperial escape pod, its golden hull by impacts and radiation burns. The pod was clearly damaged, life support systems flickering, hull integrity at 60%. But what made his hands shake as he maneuvered the Wanderer closer wasn't the condition of the pod itself. It was the Imperial seal emblazoned on its side. Not just any seal, but the personal crest of Emperor himself, the most powerful being in the known galaxy, ruler of 1,000 worlds and commander of fleets that could reduce planets to ash. "What the hell is an Imperial escape pod doing out here?" whispered to himself. The Wanderer's scanners detected a single life form inside the pod, weak bioreadings, but definitely alive. Had two choices: report the find to Imperial authorities and likely spend the rest of his life in an interrogation cell, or pretend he never saw it and move on. Both options felt wrong. Then the pod's communication system crackled to life, and a voice spoke in broken, heavily accented Standard Galactic. "Please, help, child inside, dying." Closed his eyes. He'd made his decision the moment he heard those words. Bringing the escape pod into his cargo bay took every ounce of skill possessed. The pod systems were failing rapidly, and one wrong move could trigger its self-destruct mechanism. Imperial technology didn't like unauthorized tampering. But after 30 tense minutes, the pod was secured and was cycling through the airlock into his cargo bay. Up close, the damage to the pod was even worse than he'd thought. Blast marks suggested weapons fire, and the emergency beacon had been jury-rigged from spare parts. Someone had worked desperately to get this pod away from danger, but they'd run out of time. Activated the pod's manual release sequence, and the hatch hissed open with a rush of stale, recycled air. What he saw inside changed everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. A woman lay unconscious against the pod's far wall, her breathing shallow and labored. She wore the formal robes of an Imperial court advisor, though they were torn and stained with blood. Her skin had the distinctive pale blue coloration of the species, the Emperor's own race, and intricate tattoos marked her as nobility. But it was the small figure cradled in her arms that made his heart skip a beat. A child, no more than 6 years old by human standards, with the same pale blue skin as the woman. The child's breathing was even weaker, and could see fever burning in his half-open eyes. More importantly, the child wore a simple circlet on his brow, a piece of jewelry that recognized from countless Imperial broadcasts. It was the Crown Prince's circlet, worn only by the direct heir to the Imperial throne. "Oh shit," breathed. The woman's eyes fluttered open, focusing on with obvious effort. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. You came, the beacon worked." "Lady, I need to get you both to a medical facility right away," said, kneeling beside the pod. "You're both in bad shape." The woman shook her head weakly. No Imperial facilities. They will kill him, kill us both." Felt a chill run down his spine. "Who will kill you? What happened?" "The Emperor's brother," the woman gasped. "And he He staged a coup, killed the emperor, the empress, guards loyal to the true bloodline. They got us out, but barely. The prince, he is the rightful heir now, and will hunt him to the ends of the galaxy. The implications hit like a physical blow. If what this woman said was true, then the child in her arms wasn't just any imperial heir. He was the legitimate emperor of the galaxy, displaced by a usurper, and had just become the most wanted man in known space by rescuing him. "Why should I believe any of this?" asked, though even as he said it, he knew it was true. The woman's injuries were real, her desperation genuine. "The prince carries genetic markers," the woman whispered. "Royal bloodline, any scanner will confirm, but please, he is just a child, whatever you think of the Empire. He is innocent." Look down at the unconscious child. Even through the fever, there was something regal about his features, something that spoke of noble breeding and royal blood. But more than that, there was vulnerability. This wasn't some pampered prince playing at royalty. This was a scared, sick child who just lost everything he'd ever known. The woman's breathing became more labored. I am dying, internal bleeding, but the prince, please take him somewhere safe, let him live." "Hey, don't talk like that," said, though he could see she was right. "I'm going to help both of you." "My name is Lady," the woman managed. "I was the prince's tutor, his protector, his name." "His name is," he speaks basic, a little, smart boy, kind heart. Her eyes filled with tears. "He has seen too much death already." Felt something shift inside him, a protective instinct he hadn't felt since his own son had died in a transport accident 5 years earlier. "I'll take care of him," he heard himself saying. "I promise." Lady smiled and could see life leaving her eyes. "Thank you, there is medicine in the pod, instructions, and a data chip with proof of his lineage. Guard it well." She pressed a small device into his hand, a medical injector filled with pale blue liquid. "Metabolism, different from human. This will help with the fever, but find someone who understands our physiology." "I will," promised. Lady's hand found the child's face, stroking his cheek gently. She whispered, "Be strong, little emperor. Your people need you to survive." And then she was gone, her breathing stopping as gently as a sigh. Sat in the silence of his cargo bay, holding a dead woman and an unconscious child who was apparently the rightful ruler of the galaxy. The magnitude of what had just happened pressed down on him like a physical weight. Every government in known space would want this child dead or captured. The usurper would mobilize entire fleets to find him, and was just one man with a salvage ship and a criminal record. But when the child stirred in his sleep and reached out instinctively for comfort, didn't hesitate. He gathered the boy into his arms, feeling how light and fragile he was, how young. "It's okay, kid," whispered. "You're safe now, I've got you." Even unconscious, seemed to relax at the sound of his voice, his breathing becoming slightly easier. Carefully administered the medicine Lady had given him, watching as some of the fever flush faded from the child's face. Standing up within his arms, looked down at Lady's body. She died protecting this child, had sacrificed everything to give him a chance at life. The least could do was honor that sacrifice. "Computer, set course for the outer rim neutral zones," said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. "And prepare a message beacon for transmission. Destination required for course plotting." Thought for a moment. He needed somewhere safe, somewhere the Imperial Navy didn't patrol regularly. More importantly, he needed a doctor who could treat physiology and who wouldn't ask too many questions. "Set course for station," decided. "And computer, purge all records of this salvage operation from the ship's logs. As far as anyone knows, we never came to these coordinates." Acknowledged, course plotted. Estimated travel time, 4 days, 16 hours. 4 days to figure out how to care for an alien child. 4 days before word of the coup reached the outer territories. 4 days before the hunt began in earnest. Carried to his own quarters, settling the child in his bed and pulling the covers up to his chin. The boy's face was peaceful now, the medicine having eased his fever, but could see the exhaustion that came from too much trauma for such a young mind to process. "What am I doing?" asked himself aloud. "I'm a salvage operator, not a bodyguard. I don't know anything about raising kids, especially not alien royalty." But even as he said it, knew he couldn't have made any other choice. This child had lost everything, his family, his home, his entire world. If abandoned him now, he'd be as good as signing the boy's death warrant. Over the next few hours, as the Wanderer carried them away from the asteroid field, and toward the relative safety of the outer rim, began to understand just what he'd gotten himself into. The data chip lady had given him contained not just proof of his identity, but detailed information about the coup that had torn apart the imperial government. Emperor and Empress Eth were both confirmed dead, killed in what imperial broadcasts were calling a terrorist attack on the capital world of Zephyr Prime. And the Emperor's younger brother had immediately declared himself emergency regent, claiming he was hunting down the terrorists responsible. The Imperial Council had voted him emergency powers, and most of the galaxy believed the official story. But the data chip told a different tale, and had been planning the coup for months, slowly replacing loyal guards with his own supporters, manipulating the Imperial Council, and building a power base among the military. The terrorist attack had been staged, designed to eliminate not just the Emperor and Empress, but their entire bloodline. Was the only survivor, and his survival made En's claim to the throne illegitimate. "No wonder they're hunting him," muttered, scrolling through the intelligence reports. "Kid's not just a threat to En's power, he's proof that the whole story is a lie." A soft sound from the bed made look up. Was awake, his large, dark eyes staring around the unfamiliar room with obvious confusion and fear. "Hey there," said gently, setting aside the data pad and approaching the bed slowly. "How are you feeling?" Said something in his voice, small and trembling. When looked confused, the boy switched to heavily accented basic. Where am I? Where is Lady?" Felt his heart break a little. The child had clearly been through hell, and now he had to deliver more bad news. "You're safe," said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You're on my ship, the Wanderer. Lady, she brought you to me, made sure you were safe." His eyes filled with tears as understanding dawned. "She is gone." Nodded. "I'm sorry, kid. She fought very hard to save you." For a moment, just stared at the ceiling, processing the loss of yet another person he cared about. Then, with a composure that seemed far too mature for his age, he wiped his eyes and looked at directly. "Who are you?" asked. "Why did you help us?" "My name is," he said, "and I helped because it was the right thing to do. Lady told me what happened to your family. I'm sorry about your parents." Was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "Uncle promised he would keep us safe. He said the bad people were coming and we had to hide. But then his soldiers came instead." Clenched his fists, imagining the betrayal this child had experienced. To be told you were being protected, only to discover that your protector was actually your executioner. It was a level of cruelty that makes blood boil. "Well, you're safe now," said. "I'm going to take care of you, make sure nobody hurts you anymore." "But why?" asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "I am not your responsibility. You could be in great danger for helping me." The question caught off guard. Why was he doing this? He barely knew this child, had no obligation to risk his life for imperial royalty. But looking into his eyes that had seen too much death and betrayal for someone so young, found his answer. "Because everybody deserves to be safe," said simply. "Because you're just a kid and kids shouldn't have to worry about people trying to hurt them. And because I think your parents would want someone to look out for you." Considered this, then nodded solemnly. "Lady said you were a good man. She said humans were complex but capable of great kindness." "She was pretty smart," agreed. "Now are you hungry? I've got some ration packs that aren't too terrible and we need to get some food in you." For the first time since waking up, smiled, just a small one but genuine. "I would like that, thank you." As heated up a meal and watched eat with the careful manners of someone trained in royal etiquette, he began to realize that this was about more than just keeping the child alive. Somehow, in the space of a few hours, this scared, orphaned boy had become the most important thing in this world. He thought about his own son, David, who died when his transport had suffered a navigation failure in hyperspace. David had been about his age, full of curiosity and kindness, always asking questions about the stars and distant worlds. Had never fully recovered from that loss, had spent the last 5 years drifting through space as much to run from his grief as to make a living. But now, watching struggle with utensils designed for human hands, seeing him try to be brave despite everything he'd lost, felt something he'd thought was dead forever stirring back to life. Purpose. This child needed him, not just as a protector or a guardian, but as a father figure in a galaxy that had suddenly become very hostile and very dangerous. And maybe, just maybe, needed too. So, said, settling into a chair across from the boy. Tell me about yourself. What do you like to do? What are you interested in? Looked up from his meal, surprised by the question. I like to read. Lady taught me about many worlds, many species. I want to see them someday, meet different kinds of people. He paused, then added quietly, I suppose that is no longer possible. Why not? Asked. Because I am, stopped himself, glancing around as if checking for listeners. Because of who I am, I will always have to hide now. Leaned forward, his voice serious but kind. Kid, I'm going to tell you something important. Yes, there are people who want to hurt you because of who you are. Yes, we're going to have to be careful, but that doesn't mean your life is over. It just means we're going to have to be smart about how we live it. Sighs widened. Well, yeah, said, surprised by his own certainty. You don't think I'm just going to drop you off somewhere and leave you on your own, do you? We're partners now, you and me. I'm going to teach you everything I know about staying safe in the galaxy, and you're going to help me figure out how to be a better person. Sound like a fair deal? For a moment, just stared at him. Then, slowly, the boy's face transformed with the first real smile had seen from him. Yes, said, that sounds like a very fair deal. As the Wanderer continued its journey toward station, found himself looking at the stars with new eyes. Somewhere out there, and was consolidating his power and hunting for the child eating dinner in his quarters. Somewhere out there, Imperial fleets were preparing to search every corner of known space. But here, in the small sanctuary of his salvaged ship, a man who'd lost his son was learning to be a father again. And a boy who'd lost his empire was learning that family wasn't about blood or titles. It was about people who chose to love and protect you, no matter what the cost. The real adventure was just beginning. 6 months had passed since pulled a dying alien prince from a damaged escape pod, and the galaxy had changed in ways that made his salvage runs increasingly dangerous. Every spaceport now crawled with Imperial agents. Every communication channel buzzed with coded bounty notices, and the reward for information leading to the capture of terrorist sympathizers had reached levels that made even honest merchants think twice about reporting suspicious activity. Station had become their temporary home, a ramshackle collection of habitat modules and docking ports that orbited a dying red dwarf star. It was exactly the kind of place the Imperial Navy avoided, too poor to be worth taxing, too dangerous to patrol regularly, and populated by the kind of people who minded their own business as a matter of survival. Had registered as his adopted son, using forged documentation that cost him 3 months' worth of salvage profits. To anyone who asked, the boy was a half-refugee whose human mother had died in a mining accident. It wasn't a perfect cover story, but it explains mixed features and his sometimes formal way of speaking. What hadn't expected was how naturally had adapted to life in the outer territories. The boy who'd once been destined to rule 1,000 worlds now helped repair ship components, learned to identify valuable salvage by sight, and spoke with the easy familiarity of someone born to the void. Dad, the hyperdrive coupling is loose again, called out from underneath the Wanderer's main console. At 8 years old, or the equivalent, he'd grown taller and more confident, though he still had nightmares about the night his family died. How loose? Asked, not looking up from the star charts he was studying. They had a salvage run scheduled in the Vega system, but recent Imperial patrols had made him nervous about venturing into the more civilized sectors. Loose enough that we should fix it before we jump, said, wriggling out from under the console with a smudge of grease on his pale blue cheek. I can tighten it, but we need a new stabilizer ring. Smiled despite his concerns. 6 months ago had barely known which end of a wrench to hold. Now he could diagnose ship problems with the skill of a trained engineer. All right, we'll pick one up at shop before we leave. Good catch. Beamed at the praise, then noticed expression. You're worried about something, the Imperial patrols again. Nodded, the boy had developed an uncanny ability to read his moods, probably a survival skill he'd learned during his time at court. Intelligence reports say they've stepped up searches in the outer rim sectors. Someone thinks the missing terrorists are hiding out here. Are we really terrorists? Asked, settling into the co-pilot's chair. It was a question he'd asked before, always with the same mixture of curiosity and concern. Not by any reasonable definition, said. But your uncle has made it very clear that anyone who opposes his rule is an enemy of the state. In his mind, keeping you alive makes us terrorists. Was quiet for a moment, processing this. Sometimes I wonder if it would be better if I turned myself in, if I told Uncle that I don't want to be emperor, that he can have the throne. Turned to look at the boy, seeing the weight of responsibility that no child should have to carry. And you think that would work? No, admitted. Lady taught me about succession law. As long as I'm alive, his claim is illegitimate. He would have to kill me to make it permanent. The casual way discussed his own potential execution made his heart ache. This child had been forced to grow up far too quickly to understand political realities that would challenge most adults. Well then, said, keeping his voice light, I guess we'll just have to make sure he never finds us. Before could respond, the ship's communication system chimed with an incoming message. Frowned, they weren't expecting any calls, and unsolicited communications in the outer territories were rarely good news. Wanderer, this is station control, came the scratchy voice of the traffic coordinator. You've got a priority message waiting. Sender claims it's family business. And exchanged glances. They had no family, and anyone who knew their real identities would never risk sending a message through official channels. Patch it through to my personal comm, said carefully. The message that appeared on his screen made his blood run cold. It was text only, using a code phrase that Lady had mentioned in her final moments. The silver moon rises over Zephyr Prime. The faithful remember their duty. Dock 94, midnight. Come alone, trust the darkness. What does it mean? Asked, reading over shoulder. Was already reaching for his sidearm. It means someone knows who you are, and they want to meet. The silver moon was a symbol of your mother's house, according to the cultural files left us. So they're loyal to my family. Maybe, said. Or maybe it's a trap. Imperial intelligence would have access to the same cultural information. Stood up, his young face set with determination. Then I should come with you. If it's really someone loyal to my family, they'll want to see me. And if it's a trap. If it's a trap, I want you as far away from it as possible, said firmly. You're staying here with the ship ready to run if things go bad. But Dad, no arguments. This is how we stay alive, by being careful, by not taking unnecessary risks. Softened his tone. I know you want to help, and I know you're brave enough to face whatever's out there, but the best way you can help right now is by being ready to get us out of here if needed. Nodded reluctantly. Okay, but if you're not back in 2 hours, I'm coming after you. Fair enough, agreed, knowing that the boy would absolutely follow through on that threat. Dock 94 was in the industrial section of station, where the lights were dimmer and the security cameras had convenient blind spots. Approached carefully, his hand resting on the grip of his plasma pistol, every shadow a potential threat. The dock appeared empty except for a small transport vessel of design, sleek lines and organic curves that spoke of advanced technology. As watched, a figure emerged from the ship's airlock. It was a woman, tall and elegant, wearing the kind of expensive clothing that marked her as nobility. She was young, probably in her early 30s by human standards, with the distinctive pale blue skin and silver hair of the imperial bloodline. But what caught attention were her eyes, the same deep violet color as. You must be the human who saved our prince, she said, her accent marking her as educated upper class. I am Lady Ra of House, cousin to the late emperor. Kept his distance, not relaxing his guard. Prove it. The woman smiled, reaching slowly into her robes to produce a small device. This contains genetic markers that will confirm my identity, as well as holographic records of my service to the imperial family, but perhaps a simpler proof would suffice. She began to recite something informal, her voice carrying the rhythmic cadence of ritual speech. Didn't understand the words, but he recognized the pattern. It was the same lullaby he'd heard humming to himself when he thought no one was listening. It's a traditional song of house, Lady Ra explained. Something only family members would know. The prince's grandmother used to sing it to him. Relaxed slightly, but didn't lower his hand from his weapon. Assuming you are who you say you are, what do you want? To see my cousin, Ra said simply. To know that he's alive and safe, and to offer you resources that might help keep him that way. Resources? Ra gestured toward her ship. A network of loyal houses that still believe in the legitimate succession. Safe houses, medical supplies, intelligence about imperial movements. We've been searching for Prince for months, following rumors and investigating every lead. And how did you find us? Your ship was spotted during a medical supply run 3 weeks ago. A surveillance image showed a young with distinctive royal features helping you carry cargo. Ra's expression softened. He looked so much like his father at that age. Felt a chill. If Loyal could track them down, so could Imperial agents. We need to move tonight. Agreed, but first, may I see him? Please. I've been searching for so long, and he's the last of our bloodline. Against his better judgment, found himself nodding. There was something about this woman's desperation, her obvious grief, that reminded him of Lady in her final moments. Follow me, but any sudden moves, any sign of betrayal, and I put a plasma bolt through your skull. Understood, Ra said solemnly. The walk back to the Wanderer took 15 minutes, during which kept expecting Imperial agents to emerge from every corridor. But they reached the ship without incident and led Ra through the airlock into the main cabin. Was waiting for them, having obviously ignored instructions to stay out of sight. The moment he saw Ra, his eyes widened with recognition. "Cousin Nix," he said his voice filled with wonder. Ra's composure cracked completely. She dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face, and opened her arms. Ran to her without hesitation and watched as the boy was enveloped in an embrace from someone who knew him, who remembered him as he'd been before the world changed. They spoke rapidly Ra asking questions about his health, his safety, his life with. Answered eagerly, clearly hungry for connection with someone from his past. Couldn't understand the words, but the emotion was unmistakable. Finally, Ra looked up her eyes still wet with tears. "You have cared for him well. He speaks of you with great affection, calls you his true father." Felt his throat tighten. "He's a good kid, makes it easy." "What he has done," Ra said, "taking in a stranger's child, protecting him at such personal risk, this is not common in the galaxy. Most would have turned him over to authorities for the reward." "Most people haven't watched their own child die," said quietly. "Most people don't know what it's like to get a second chance." Ra studied him with new understanding. "Ah, you have lost family as well." "My son, about's age. Transport accident 5 years ago." Shrugged, trying to keep the old pain from showing. "Not much point in dwelling on it." "And yet it gives you strength to protect another child who has lost everything," Ra observed. "Perhaps the Force guides us in ways we do not understand." Before could ask what she meant by the Force, switched back to basic, clearly wanting to include in the conversation. "Cousin Nick says there are others like us, other families that survived the purge." "How many?" asked. "Not many," Ra admitted, and was thorough in his planning, "but there are perhaps 24 noble houses that remain loyal to the true succession, scattered across the galaxy. We've been organizing quietly, preparing for the day when we can restore legitimate rule." Preparing how? Tactical instincts were kicking in. Because if you're talking about mounting some kind of resistance, you should know that the boy isn't going to be part of it. He's 8 years old. "Of course not," Ra said quickly. "Our immediate concern is keeping him safe, hidden, alive until he reaches maturity. The resistance, such as it is, focuses on intelligence gathering and protecting other survivors." Looked between them, his expression serious. "What kind of intelligence?" Ra hesitated, then seemed to decide that the boy deserved to know. "And support isn't as solid as he pretends. The military follows him out of habit and fear, but there are cracks forming. Economic problems, resentment over his increasingly harsh policies, rumors about what really happened to your parents." "Rumors? Your father was popular with the common people," Ra explained. "He reduced taxes, improved conditions on the industrial worlds, treated non-species as equals, and has reversed most of those policies, claiming they were mistakes that made the empire weak." Could see where this was going. And people are starting to question whether the man who made those weak policies could have been killed by random terrorists. Exactly, which is why it's more important than ever that survive to adulthood. In 10 years, when he's old enough to rule, the galaxy might be ready to listen to the truth about what happened. 10 years is a long time, said. Lot can happen. Yes, Ra agreed, which is why I'm offering you this. She produced a data chip from her robes. Safe house locations, loyal contacts, emergency protocols, everything you need to keep moving to stay ahead of Imperial searches. Took the chip, weighing it in his palm. Information was valuable in the outer territories, but information about the Imperial succession was the kind of thing that got people killed. And in return, Nothing, Ra said, except perhaps occasional communications to let us know you're both alive, and if you ever need help, resources, medical care, call us. It was a generous offer, perhaps too generous. Had learned to be suspicious of gifts that seemed too good to be true. But seeing the happiness in the boy's eyes at being reunited with family, he found himself wanting to trust this woman. Dad said quietly, I think we should accept Cousin Nix's help, she's family. Nodded slowly. All right, but we do this my way, minimal contact, maximum security, and if I even suspect a trap, we disappear permanently. Agreed, Ross said, though I hope that won't be necessary. They spent the next 2 hours going over the intelligence Ra had brought. The picture it painted of the galaxy was troubling. Imperial forces were indeed closing in on the outer territories, following every lead and investigating every suspicious individual. But there were also opportunities, safe routes through less monitored systems, contacts who could provide supplies and information. As Ra prepared to leave, hugged her tightly. Will I see you again? He asked in basic. I hope so, little cousin, she replied. But if not, know that you are loved, that you are remembered, and that someday you will have the chance to reclaim what was stolen from your family. After Ra's ship had departed and sat in the Wanderer's main cabin, processing everything that had happened, the boy seemed energized by the contact with his cousin, but couldn't shake his unease. You're worried she might have been followed, observed. Among other things, agreed. But mostly I'm worried that this changes things between us. Now that you know there are others working to restore you to the throne, you might start thinking about your destiny, your responsibilities to your people. Was quiet for a long moment. Do you want to know what I told Cousin Nix about you? Raised an eyebrow. I told her that you saved my life, but that wasn't the most important thing you did. I told her that you taught me what it means to have a family that chooses to love you, not because they have to, but because they want to. Felt his eyes burn with sudden moisture. I also told her that if the people want me to be their emperor someday, they're going to have to accept that I was raised by a human who taught me that titles don't make you worthy, actions do. And that my first act as emperor would be to make you a noble of the highest rank, because you've shown more honor than any lord or lady I ever met at court. I'm not going anywhere, Dad, the boy said firmly. Whatever happens in the future, whatever responsibilities I might have to accept someday, you're my family now. That doesn't change. Pulled into a hug, grateful beyond words for this strange, wonderful child who'd come into his life at exactly the moment when he'd needed hope again. Good, said, his voice rough with emotion, because I'm not letting you go either. Emperor or not, you're stuck with me. Good, echoed, grinning. Now, can we please get out of here before those Imperial agents you're so worried about show up? Laughed, the tension of the evening finally breaking. Yeah, let's go. What do you say to a nice, quiet salvage run in the system? I hear they've got some interesting wreckage from the old mining wars. Sounds perfect, agreed, but I still think we should fix that hyperdrive coupling first. As the Wanderer prepared to leave station behind, felt a familiar mixture of anxiety and anticipation. The galaxy was becoming more dangerous every day. Their enemies were closing in, and the stakes kept getting higher. But sitting beside him in the co-pilot's chair was a boy who'd somehow learned to be both a prince and a regular kid, who'd found the strength to build a new life from the ashes of the old one. And maybe that was worth all the risks they'd have to take. The stars stretched out before them, vast and infinite and full of possibilities. Somewhere among them was safety, a place where they could build a future together. They just had to be smart enough, brave enough, and lucky enough to find it. Engaged the hyperdrive, and the Wanderer leaped into the void, carrying two souls who'd found family in the most unlikely place, each other. The warning came through encrypted channels at 400 ship time, 3 years after, and had begun their life as fugitives. Lady Ra's voice crackled through the quantum communicator with barely controlled panic. They've found us, and has located the resistance network. Imperial forces are moving on all safe houses. You have perhaps 6 hours before they reach your sector. Was already moving before the transmission ended, his years of military training kicking in with automatic precision. Emergency departure protocol now. 11-year-old appeared from his sleeping quarters already dressed and carrying his emergency pack. 3 years of running had taught him to sleep light and move fast. How much time do we have? he asked, his voice steady despite the circumstances. Not enough, replied, powering up the Wanderer's systems with practiced efficiency. Nix thinks 6 hours, but I'd rather assume 2. Can you get the navigation systems online while I prep the hyperdrive? Already on it, said, sliding into his position at the co-pilot's station. His fingers flew over the controls with the confidence of someone who'd been doing this since he was 8. Course plotted for the nebula, alternate routes loaded and ready. Felt a surge of pride watching the boy work. Over the past 3 years had grown not just physically, but in ways that constantly amazed. The frightened child who'd hidden in an escape pod had become a confident young man, equally comfortable navigating hyperspace routes and discussing galactic politics. But more than that, he'd retained his compassion, his sense of justice, and his ability to find hope in the darkest situations. Dad said quietly as the ship prepared for departure, Nix mentioned that they'd found the resistance network. What about the others, the other survivors? Paused in his pre-flight checks. It was the question he'd been dreading, but one that deserved an honest answer. I don't know, kid. Nix's ship went dark after her transmission. Could be communication blackout, could be worse. Nodded, his expression serious but controlled. She saved us by warning us. We have to remember that. The Wanderer lifted off from the asteroid mining station they'd been calling home for the past 6 months, accelerating toward the jump point with all the speed could coax from the aging engines. Behind them, the long-range sensors began picking up Imperial Navy signatures, a full battle group, moving through the system with military precision. They're not taking any chances this time, observed, watching the tactical display. That's enough firepower to glass a planet. They really want me dead, don't they? Said, though there was more curiosity than fear in his voice. Looked at his adopted son, because that's what had become, in every way that mattered, and marveled at the young man's resilience. Yeah, they really do, which tells us how much of a threat you represent to En's rule. Good, said with quiet determination. I hope I am a threat to him. I hope he loses sleep every night knowing I'm out here, knowing that someday I'm going to expose the truth about what he did. They carried them deep into the nebula, a region of space where sensor readings were unreliable and navigation was treacherous. It had become their sanctuary over the past year, a place where the Imperial Navy's overwhelming technological advantages were neutralized by the chaotic physics of the nebula itself. For 3 days, they drifted through the cosmic storm clouds, staying silent and monitoring Imperial communications. The news that filtered through was worse than had feared. The resistance network had been completely shattered, with safe houses raided across 24 systems. Lady Ra was listed among the captured, though whether she was alive or dead remained unclear. It's my fault, said on the 3rd day, staring out at the swirling colors of the nebula. All those people risking their lives for me, and now they're gone. Put a hand on the boy's shoulder. It's not your fault, it's Anne's. He's the one who chose to murder his own family, who chose to hunt down anyone who opposed him. The people who helped us made their own choices, and they made them because they believed in something bigger than themselves. But if I hadn't survived... If you hadn't survived, then and would have won completely. Every person who died believing in justice would have died for nothing. Turned to face him. You want to honor their sacrifice? Then survive. Grow up strong. Learn everything you can about leadership and justice and how to be the kind of emperor your people deserve. And someday, when you're ready, take back what's rightfully yours. Nodded slowly. I will, but I can't do it alone. You won't have to, promised. I'll be right there with you. It was a promise that would be tested sooner than either of them expected. On the 4th day, their long-range sensors detected something impossible. A single ship, moving through the nebula with navigation precision that should have been impossible given the electromagnetic interference. It was heading directly for their position. That's not random, said, studying the sensor readings. Someone knows exactly where we are. Imperial ship, asked. Can't tell yet, but whoever it is, they've got technology we haven't seen before. Began powering up the Wanderer's defensive systems. Could be a trap, could be rescue. Either way, we need to be ready for anything. The approaching vessel resolved on there as something neither of them had ever seen before, sleek, organic-looking, with hull configurations that seemed to shift and flow like living tissue. It was clearly of advanced design, but not from any known species in the galactic database. Wanderer, came a voice over the communication system, speaking perfect standard galactic with an accent couldn't place. "This is captain of the ship. We're here to help." "Help how?" replied cautiously. "And why should we trust you?" "Because 3 days ago, Lady Ra gave her life to ensure this location reached us instead of Imperial forces. And because the Galactic Liberation Front doesn't abandon children to tyrants." And exchanged glances. They'd never heard of the Galactic Liberation Front, but the mention of Ra's sacrifice carried the ring of truth. "You have 30 seconds to prove you're not Imperial agents," said. "Starting now." The response came immediately. His full name and royal lineage, spoken informal, followed by details about their escape from Zephyr Prime that only someone with access to Ladies' records could have known. "Permission to come aboard?" the voice asked. Looked at, who nodded. "Granted, but any funny business and you'll find out why humans have a reputation for being dangerously protective of their children." The docking procedure was unlike anything had experienced. Instead of extending a mechanical docking tube, they seemed to grow a connection to the Wanderer, with biomechanical tendrils that sealed around their airlock with perfect precision. The woman who stepped through the airlock was human, but her equipment and clothing were clearly of alien design. She was tall, athletic, with the kind of scars that spoke of serious combat experience. Her eyes were kind but alert, taking in everything about their ship in a single glance. "Captain," she said, extending a hand to. "And you must be the prince," she added, turning to. "You look like your father. He would be proud of the man you're becoming." "You knew my father?" asked, surprised. "I met him once during diplomatic negotiations between the Empire and the Resistance Coalition. He was a good man, trying to bring justice to a corrupt system." His expression darkened. "His death was a loss for the entire galaxy." "The Resistance Coalition?" asked. "I thought the galaxy was unified under Imperial rule." Smiled grimly. "That's what the Empire wants everyone to believe, but there have always been those who refused to bow to tyranny. After Anne's coup, those separate resistance movements began working together. We call ourselves the Galactic Liberation Front." "And you want to join your revolution?" His protective instincts were firing on all cylinders. "Eventually, when he's ready. But right now, we want to offer him something more valuable than military alliance." Looked directly at. "We want to offer him an education, training in leadership, statecraft, military tactics, and the skills he'll need to be an effective ruler when the time comes." "Where?" asked. "Avalon," said. "A hidden world beyond the reach of Imperial forces. It's where we train our leaders, where we preserve the knowledge and ideals that the Empire tries to destroy. You would be safe there, able to grow and learn without constantly looking over your shoulder." Felt his heart sink. He'd known this day would come eventually, whence destiny would pull him away from the simple life they'd built together. But knowing it was coming didn't make it hurt any less. And asked immediately, "What about my father?" "He's welcome as well if he chooses to come," said. "His experience as both a soldier and a protector would be valuable to our cause, but the choice is his to make." Looked at, seeing the hope and excitement in the boy's eyes, but also the uncertainty. This was clearly what needed: real training, preparation for his future role, connection with others who shared his ideals. But it meant leaving behind the life they'd built together. "What do you think, kid?" asked quietly. I think I need to do this," said slowly. "But only if you come with me. I meant what I said before. You're my family. Whatever my destiny is, I want to face it with you beside me." Felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Then I guess we're joining the revolution." Smiled. "Welcome to the Liberation Front. Fair warning, it's not going to be easy." And has spent the last 3 years consolidating power, building up his military, crushing dissent. Taking him down is going to require everything we have. "Good," said, with the quiet intensity that reminded of the boy's royal breeding. "He's had 3 years to enjoy his stolen throne. I think it's time he started worrying about losing it." The journey to Avalon took 2 weeks, traveling through hyperspace routes that seemed to exist outside normal navigation charts. This technology was centuries ahead of anything had seen, apparently developed by a species called the Architects who had long ago transcended physical existence, but still guided worthy civilizations toward freedom and justice. Avalon itself was breathtaking, a world of floating cities and crystal spires, where representatives from dozens of species worked together to plan the liberation of the galaxy. It was everything the Empire claimed to be but wasn't. diverse, just, and united by shared ideals rather than fear. Threw himself into his studies with the same intensity he'd once brought to ship maintenance. He learned languages, military strategy, galactic history, and the complex art of building alliances across species lines. But more than that, he learned about the people he would someday rule, their hopes, their struggles, their dreams for a better future. Found his own role in the Liberation Front, training new recruits in combat techniques, and serving as a strategic advisor for operations in Imperial space. It felt good to be fighting for something again, to use his skills for a cause that mattered. But it was watching grow into his destiny that gave the greatest satisfaction. The scared child he'd rescued from an escape pod was becoming a true leader, someone who inspired loyalty through compassion rather than fear, who understood that real strength came from protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. On his 18th birthday, 6 years after arriving on Avalon, the Liberation Front's council formally recognized him as the rightful emperor of Zephyr Prime and all its territories. It was a symbolic gesture, since it still held actual power, but it marked an important transition. That evening, found standing on one of the floating platforms, looking up at the stars. Nervous, asked. Terrified, admitted. Tomorrow we launch the first major offensive against Imperial forces. Real battles, real casualties. People are going to die because of decisions I make. People are already dying because of decisions and makes, pointed out. At least now they'll be dying for something that matters. Nodded, I know, but that doesn't make it easier. He turned to look at. Dad, I want you to know whatever happens in the fighting ahead, you gave me the most important gift anyone could give. What's that? You taught me that family isn't about blood or titles or destiny. It's about choosing to love someone, to protect them, to stand by them no matter what the cost. Smiled. You taught me how to be human even though I'm not. Pulled his son, because that's what would always be, emperor or not, into a fierce hug. You taught me something too, kid. You taught me that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is just show up when they need you. The war that followed lasted 3 years and reshaped the galaxy. And's forces were vast and well-equipped, but they were fighting an empire in revolt. World after world declared independence. Species that had been oppressed for generations rose up in rebellion, and the Liberation Front's message of freedom spread faster than Imperial forces could contain it. Fought in a dozen battles, led commando raids on Imperial installations, and watched with pride as proved himself both a brilliant military strategist and an inspiring leader. The boy who'd once hidden in an escape pod now commanded fleets and negotiated treaties with the confidence of someone born to rule. The final battle took place in orbit around Zephyr Prime itself, with Liberation forces facing the last remnants of And's fleet. Stood on the bridge of the Liberation, his flagship, watching as Imperial ships surrendered one by one. And himself died in the fighting, choosing to go down with his dreadnought rather than face trial for his crimes. In a way, was grateful for that, had already seen too much death, and he didn't need the burden of executing his own uncle. 6 months later, stood in the grand throne room of the Imperial Palace, watching as was formally crowned Emperor of Zephyr Prime and Protector of the Galactic Federation, the new government that had replaced the old empire. Representatives from hundreds of worlds had come to witness the ceremony and couldn't help but smile at the diversity of the crowd. This was the galaxies parents had dreamed of, united by choice rather than conquest, governed by justice rather than fear. After the ceremony, as the crowds dispersed and the celebrations began, found standing on one of the palace balconies. So, the new emperor said, settling beside his adoptive father, how does it feel to be the father of an emperor? About the same as it felt to be the father of a scared 8-year-old hiding in my cargo bay, replied. Proud, protective, and wondering how the hell I got so lucky. Laughed, I've been thinking about that myself. What are the odds that a random salvage operator would just happen to find an Imperial escape pod? What are the odds that the one person in the galaxy who needed a son would meet the one child who needed a father? Maybe Ra was right, said. Maybe the Force really does guide us in ways we don't understand. Or maybe, suggested, sometimes the universe just knows what it's doing. As they watched the suns set over the capital city, a city that was already being rebuilt according to principles of equality and justice, reflected on the strange path that had brought them here. A salvage operator had become a revolutionary, A lost prince had become a true emperor. A man who'd given up hope had found it again in the most unlikely place. And somewhere in the palace below them, children from a dozen different species were playing together, growing up in a galaxy where their potential would be limited only by their dreams rather than their birth. It had been a good life, thought, a very good life indeed. "So what now, Dad?" asked. "I know you've had offers from the new military command, and I could use your advice here at court." Smiled, Now I think I'd like to go back to the Outer Rim for a while. There are a lot of kids out there who need someone to show up when they're in trouble, and I've gotten pretty good at that over the years." Nodded, understanding immediately. The foundation for lost children. "Something like that, though I was thinking more along the lines of just being in the right place at the right time." Put an arm around his son's shoulders. "But I'll be back for visits. Can't let you forget where you came from." "Never promised. And Dad, thank you for everything." As the stars came out over Zephyr Prime, felt the deep satisfaction of a job well done. The scared child he'd pulled from a damaged escape pod had grown up to become exactly the kind of leader the galaxy needed. And maybe, just maybe, had played a small part in making that possible. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything.